I don't have enough of this ammo. Oh, I remember. It just had MB written on it, but they were not the ones who delivered it. I believe that even this world wants... I have to fold my laundry before it's too late. It's the same hatch as the one to go to my attic, but this one is not ready to move. Impossible to open. Opening this box didn't feel right. I can't remember why we did it. Pierre felt the same way about it. Pretty unconventional to receive a hazmat suit out of the blue. We left it in the attic, thinking its owner would show himself. But now I know why you didn't, Matthew Banks. Great. More music stuff from Pierre. He had so many cassettes here. At times, I wondered if he wanted to be mummified with the loose tapes. I remember. It was during the month of September. The weather was still warm and cloudless. It promised to be a beautiful day. I had gone to take out the trash when I saw this big cardboard box lying there in front of the house door. Above were inscribed in bold initials, M.B. At the time, I didn't know what those letters stood for. It wasn't until much later that I learned they meant Matthew Banks, the former tenant of the house. So I didn't ask myself any more questions and went to the post office. It must also be said that it wasn't the first time I had to return a package that didn't belong to me. But this time it was different. When I handed the parcel to the secretary, she replied that she had never seen anything like it, and that she would not take care of it. When I got home, I couldn't help it. I opened the package. Maybe I shouldn't have. A surprise sure was waiting for me inside. This was a kind of scientific suit that was to be used to protect against chemicals and deadly viruses or that kind of ultra-nice things. I was paralyzed, shocked. I wanted to understand. Why did the former tenant need this kind of outfit? For the garden? His work? But then what kind of work was it? As soon as he got home, I showed the package to Pierre. He wasn't really comfortable with the idea of this sort of thing hanging in our house either. We relegated it to the attic. It's not as if the place for such an item was in the living room. We thought at the time, maybe Matthew will want to recover what belongs to him. It was a new beginning. We no longer had a penny in our pocket, but it all started 6 years ago. At the time, I was still a student, and I spent the little free time I had at the bar with my group of friends. In fact, we always went to the same one. We were happy there. What we particularly liked were the concerts organized by the small amateur groups that came by from time to time. Nothing very extraordinary in itself, but the atmosphere they created was magical and went wonderfully with our little evenings based on the cheapest beers we could find. After all, we were still students. And then, there was this group. They had been coming for several days, and their music kind of hypnotized me. The type of rock that you don't forget, and that I haven't forgotten. I must admit that the guitarist had something to do with it. His name was Pierre. There were always these moments after the concerts when the members of the group hung out a bit at the bar, but I didn't dare approach him, and I think he didn't either. The more it went, the more our eyes met, sought each other. I felt that something was happening. One evening, when the effects of the alcohol were strong, I no longer hesitated. I went to see him. From an outside perspective, it was probably embarrassing. At least I would have been. But that didn't seem to bother him. We talked for hours. But it seemed like it was over in an instant. I could see he was shy, and when we left the bar, I grabbed his arm and kissed him. We shouldn't have parted on a misunderstanding. I love this story. Our story. But that doesn't explain why we chose St. Exel to fully live our lives together, does it? At that time, Pierre and I were in our last year of college. We had already been able to take full advantage of the city and its agitation, and even if the years we spent there were fantastic, we really needed a change of scenery. A return to a calmer setting. Yep, that's what we needed. And it was when we were watching a report on a seaside region that we had the click. The landscapes were simply sublime. I always remembered what Pierre said to me at that time. Honey, okay, let's move. We just had time to finish our studies and put some money aside when an advertisement for a house for rent in St. Exel caught our eye. This song? Pierre had written a song about all that. It was a new beginning. We no longer had a penny in our pocket, but real hope in our eyes. Nobody knew us here. We were really starting from zero. We could have completely changed our ways of being if we had wanted. We had found the house that seemed perfect. At least perfect for us. It was a large building made entirely of wood and stones from the region, and which proudly faced the sea. We had so much space. We were finally able to breathe. And then there was a fireplace that gave such a warm atmosphere. It gave me a quiet yet powerful feeling of serenity since the first day. Well, up until what is happening at the moment. Although, we must admit that it deserves a little refurbishment, or at least a little wiping. The paint has suffered the effects of salt and time, and the holy windows let the wind pass through the whole house. You can hardly see it, but we threw all our last savings into this hole. Anyway, Pierre was only thinking of one thing: take as much space as possible to store his instruments, whether it's the bedrooms, the living room, or even the attic. Today, the garden is in a sad state. It looks like a dump. I used a lot of things that were lying around for tinkering or training. I feel good in this garden, especially right now. It's the only place I know I can be safe. None of these things are going to attack me here. With all the boxes we had, the laziness quickly caught up with us. This explains this feeling of permanent mess or perpetual moving. Life in boxes. Maybe we didn't really dare to open them all. Maybe it was too heavy after all these kilometers between us and people we love. It reminded us of too many things. It reminds me even more today. We were really happy here in St. Exel. It did us a lot of good to make this new start. But there was something we couldn't have foreseen. The people around us seemed disturbed, as if something in this village was brewing, a kind of grim emotion taking slowly over the population. And everyone said the same thing, whether at the bakery, in the street, or in the neighborhood. The village of St. Exel was clearly no longer the little corner of paradise it once was. We heard really odd things, like how the nature of the area had changed without anybody knowing why. Pets running away, wild animals leaving the region, or even new plants appearing where others disappeared. Even more worrying, some residents vanished into the thin air overnight, leaving no traces nor contact addresses. It makes me think of Matthew Banks, the spy who used to live in the house. But at least this one, I know why he's gone. Pierre and I started looking for information on what was happening in St. Exel. The least we can say is that we were not disappointed. According to reports from different hospitals, certain diseases seemed much more prevalent in St. Exel than anywhere else. I also was informed that the number of miscarriages among women in the village were abnormally high. It does not make you want to try to build a family here. Because of all these stories, many charlatans came to settle in St. Exel. According to them, the place would have unique properties, or things like that. In short, another way found by these degenerates to fill their pockets. And it worked. Well, that's what I thought. With what's happening to me right now, I'm almost going to believe them. Am I going nuts? In any case, it explains why the sect of the devoted was able to take root and develop here. Why haven't we moved out with Pierre again? Probably because we couldn't afford it anymore. Sometimes I think we should have just dumped everything and gone far. As far as possible. I remember. It was during the month of September. The weather was still warm and cloudless. It promised to be a beautiful day. I had gone to take out the trash when I saw this big cardboard box lying there in front of the house door. Above were inscribed in bold initials, M.B. At the time, I didn't know what those letters stood for. It wasn't until much later that I learned they meant Matthew Banks, the former tenant of the house. So I didn't ask myself any more questions and went to the post office. It must also be said that it wasn't the first time I had to return a package that didn't belong to me. But this time it was different. When I handed the parcel to the secretary, she replied that she had never seen anything like it, and that she would not take care of it. When I got home, I couldn't help it. I opened the package. Maybe I shouldn't have. A surprise sure was waiting for me inside. This was a kind of scientific suit that was to be used to protect against chemicals and deadly viruses or that kind of ultra-nice things. I was paralyzed, shocked. I wanted to understand. Why did the former tenant need this kind of outfit? For the garden? His work? But then what kind of work was it? As soon as he got home, I showed the package to Pierre. He wasn't really comfortable with the idea of this sort of thing hanging in our house either. We relegated it to the attic. It's not as if the place for such an item was in the living room. We thought at the time, maybe Matthew will want to recover what belongs to him. to restore some kind of joy and positive atmosphere in the village. The mayor and the villagers gave themselves hearts and souls to maintain the good performance of the festivals and the annual fair. We liked that kind of stuff with Pierre, so we went and took a look. Obviously, we weren't the only ones to appreciate. Almost the whole village was there. And to add beauty to the heart, the weather had even joined the party. It was a beautiful day. Ideal for celebrating outdoors. We took advantage of this moment to discuss work and professional future at St. Axel, still a little obscure for us. I was struggling to find a stable job in the area, and Pierre absolutely wanted me to pass this interview for a company that I had contacted. Despite the many discussions we had on the topic, we never managed to come to an agreement. There was therefore only one solution. The final decision will be picked during one of the fair ball games. It was our tightest match, and Pierre had to throw the last ball. My future was in his hands. But when it was time to shoot, a very violent, almost deafening noise rang in our ears. It was 2 fighter planes that were very close to St. Axel, and in particular, the place where the fair was being held. And then after that, nothing. Or more precisely, silence. Everyone had their eyes fixed on the sky. Several seconds after that, there was a muffled sound in the distance. An explosion? I saw concern and panic creeping into the faces of the inhabitants. It was not normal. The planes and now this? What was going on? The silence was again broken by many birds coming out of the trees. The fair was surrounded by a forest, and we couldn't have any idea what was going on there. Thick yellow smoke began to appear. A few tens of seconds later, it already occupied almost entirely the place of the party. Pierre and I were paralyzed, unable to move. I saw some of the people in the fair breathing in the gas and immediately collapsing as if dead. We could only see about 20 meters away, I would say. And among this hubbub, or rather this general panic, I distinguished sounds, voices, which were spoke through walkie-talkies. I couldn't understand, but I managed to hear a sentence. Only one. Grab them all, till the last one. At that time I saw what seemed to me like dozens and dozens of soldiers coming out of the woods. They were everywhere. They were armed and wore suits that allowed them not to breathe the gas and probably see a little more clearly than us. In a burst of courage, or stupidity, Pierre and I fled as far as possible without looking back. We returned home, knowing that we were trapped. We locked the door, taking one last look at the gas that was already progressing down our street. We were probably not the only ones who managed to escape. It was clear that they weren't going to leave us alone. We then thought of the same thing. We climbed up there top speed, and the box was still neatly stored, as if it was waiting for us. But we both knew on the way up, there was only one suit, only one mask. Pierre left me no choice. It was so fast. I told him he couldn't do that. I didn't want to. Nothing worked. He made me put on the suit and the mask. I had tears in my eyes. I think he did too. He turned, looked at the window and exclaimed, "I see them. They arrive," and he took me in his arms and we stayed like that. I had the impression that it lasted for hours and just a few seconds. We felt the ground shaking, the furniture lying around vibrating. My eyes fell on Pierre again. He saw that I was terrified and I didn't want to let go of him. He looked at me and he smiled and he said, "Stay with me." Suddenly a kind of white light pierced the room from side to side, revealing us. He looked at me for the last time and whispered, "I love you, Elise." A few minutes later I woke up, at 8 o'clock sharp in the morning. I was lying in my bed, the light, the gas, the soldiers, Pierre. Everything had disappeared. I went outside. I was alone, left completely apart in St. Axel.